speaker this evening owns a law firm that primarily focuses on estate planning, including wills, trusts, powers of attorney, probate, and business law. Her law firm has been awarded 3 years in a row as one of the 500 fastest growing small law firms in the country, which is a testament to her team and how we've been able to make families and individuals planning this vital to them. Lorie has engaged in many civic and community organizations and advocacy. In 2018, she ran for United States Congress for the 3rd District of Texas. She recently served as the Lamba Legal Dallas Leadership Committee from 2014 to 2016. She served on the Black Tie Dinner Board. She served as the 2013-14 National President of the Board of Directors for the American Businesswoman. She is also a past chairwoman of the board for the North Texas LGBT Chamber and was formerly the co-chair of the DFW Human Rights Campaign Steering Committee. In 2013, Lorie was voted as Dallas's best civil family law attorney by the readers of Dallas Voice for the 4th time. In 2022, Lorie was honored as Business of the Year by the North Texas LGBT Chamber. Additionally, Lorie was honored by the Dallas Business Journal in 2013, and she is recognized as the 2010 Top 10 Businesswomen for the American Businesswomen's Association. It is my pleasure, and we're so happy to see her. She's been absent from us for a while, so I'm so glad she joined us. Please help me welcome Lorie Burch.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Hi, everybody. I asked to be off spotlight so I could see your faces, and I actually want to see the chat here. Let's see. Cool. All right. Well, Nanelle, if you wanted me to come back to a meeting, best way to do it is to ask me to speak. So
That's what we did.
Meredith can affirm that I did pay my dues. So at least there's that. But hey, this is kind of an interesting setup here. I don't know whether to talk to you all online but I mean, I've spent a long time talking to Anthony, Rebecca, Nanelle, and Kella. So I'll just talk to, well, all of you too. So what is there that you don't know already? But anyway, I am happy to be here. I do have some handouts, and I will put URLs into the chat. So I think most of you know, if you were paying attention, that I do have my own law practice. One of the very first things that I did was join this new budding networking Express network. What's that? We don't talk about it. It's just a league. We don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about chapters, and we don't talk about Express networks. We just talk about leagues. But anyway, so I too was actually a charter member. I forgot about that because I found this name tag, but this doesn't have charter member on it anymore. I'm sorry, Laura and Janice, but I actually let that one go into my keepsakes when I got the national president top 10 name match. But they still mean a lot to me. But so some of you remember when I was first doing this, and I'm still doing it. So I must know what I'm doing. And so let's get right to it. Now, I am licensed just in Texas, well, technically Maryland, but I don't think that applies to anybody. And I wouldn't ask me to do anything there. But I do want to, help educate you, answer questions, which is one reason why I wanted to have the chat up, because what I have found in 18 years of doing this, that there's just a lot of misunderstandings and misperceptions. And that's actually one of the places that I want to start, is just going through some things that might shock you, even people that have heard me say this so many times, which is shocking to me because it means you're not paying attention. But let me refresh some of your memories about what can happen when you don't have a will. And I can't believe I've gotten this far in this meeting and I haven't said, if there's one takeaway, if you don't have a will, the state of Texas has one for you. Excellent. Yes, that's right. And we now have a team of 12 people. Can you believe that? It was just little old Lorie when you all first met me, and now there are 12 employees of Burch Law. And one of them is a marketing coordinator, Sarah. And I was just telling her the other day, like, what a gift it is that we are in Texas. Because do you think if you said, if you don't have a will, the state of Delaware has one for you? I mean, ooh, Delaware, right? But like when you say the state of Texas has one for you, you're like, no, we're better than that here. So anyway, so a lot of this is very good. I know we have at least one person, and you know, Amy, you keep talking about me getting licensed in California. The alternative is you could just move here. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Not with 119-degree weather. No, thank you.
Yeah. Did you pick up on like all the outdoor activities people said they want to do here? And I'm like, I mean, my real like pastime is like finding where the air conditioner is and doing the remote start on my car 15 minutes before I get into it. That is my summertime activity, truly. But I don't blame you for that. It is a little disheartening that when I was in my 20s, I didn't notice it as being so hot. And now it's just like, what is this? This is terrible. I can't take it. But anyway, so I don't know if there's any other non-Texans, but there's still some generalities that I want to talk about to hopefully get through. And I really do want to answer questions. So put them in the chat or wait till the end. That's fine, whatever you want. But let's talk about some things that I find are very common misperceptions. And I love if I could pull from you all some interaction. And because this is a personal and professional development association, one thing that I want to give you a tip, because apparently for people who aren't named Lorie Burch and Laura Orlando, public speaking is very intimidating to you. And so here's tip number one. If you just ask a lot of questions, you get your people to write it for you. Like you have to be very, very unprepared. Just ask questions. All right. So my first question is, well, let's do it this way. We'll do it as more like a hypothetical, although I'll use an actual client that we had. Because I've found that when I give you the information ahead of time and then I do this hypothetical, too many of you can guess the answer. So let's run through this. Let's say we've got a couple named Joe and Sarah. And let's say that they've been married forever. And when they got married, they bought a house, they acquired assets, all of that. And then Joe's driving home on the tollway one day, gets in an accident, passes away, no will. Who owns the house? Sarah owns the house. Does she, I said no. Does she automatically own the house? Does Sarah have to do it? What do you mean how it's vested? What, Nanelle, what is this? What is this wizardry you're talking about, joint tenancy? If it's joint tenants, what? The survivor gets the house? Okay. I want to hold on to that right there. Anthony. We're community property.
So the spouse would
Automatically.
I'm saying automatically. I'm giving you ammunition. There you go.
Okay. Okay.
What about their kids?
I didn't, we're not, no kids at this point. That's number two. Okay. So interesting, Nanelle, that's how you know you got a banker here throwing expressions like joint tenancy at me. So something that we have to unravel all of the time in Texas is that, Nanelle, did you know that Texas doesn't have joint tenancy? No, we don't. So joint tenancy is the idea that you buy or acquire assets together. I'm using an example of a home because that's very triggering for people that their own home doesn't belong to them. We don't have that. So this joint tenancy with rights of survivorship means a married couple or really just two people can go own a property together. And if one of them passes away, it would automatically go to the survivor. Does not exist in Texas. Exists in most states, California being one of them, Amy, but does not exist. So something has to happen. It doesn't mean that if you didn't go through some court process that it would go to Sarah in my scenario, but more about this in a little bit. She's going to spend about $7,000 in probably 9 months or so in a probate court to make it come to her. So let's have some fun with Rebecca's question. All right, same scenario, except Joe was married before, had 2 kids, gets divorced, meets Sarah, gets married, buys a house, dies on the tollway, no will, who owns the house?
The youngest child from his first marriage.
That I've never heard that. In fact, the youngest child from his first, okay.
Who would be-
Are you just having fun guessing?
No, I have a friend that's going through that now, and so they're having to go to court to see about that.
And it's just the youngest child, not, okay.
It's the youngest child.
Does your friend have a lawyer that's licensed in Texas?
Well, they're getting a lawyer. Yes.
Okay, okay,
Yes.
yeah, they probably should get one. What else? Huh? Who owns the house? They bought it together. This is a community property state. They bought it together after they got married.
After they got married.
After they got married.
I think it still should go to Sarah, but
You think it should go to Sarah?
yeah, I bet half of the other.
Are there any, come on, we got chat up here. No guesses? Oh, wait, is there an expiration date on probating now? Ooh, that's a good question. Debbie, we'll get to that. I like that
Well, I'm
question a lot.
guessing the state of Texas owns it because you keep saying, because that's your tagline.
I'm actually surprised, and I don't know if people are trying to be sensitive to Nanelle, but I usually get one or two saying the bank owns it. So in Texas, if there are children from outside of marriage, the children inherit all the community property. Not just the youngest, so I don't know where that's coming from, but what if Joe and Sarah also had a child together? Yeah, Sarah is. So all three of them would share. What if they only had two children together? No children, Sarah. What if Joe owned the house before getting married and then Sarah moved in? Joe's kids are his parents, not Sarah. My point is,
How long were they
My-
married?
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If it's separate property, anything you own prior to the marriage, then it
Here's my
actually doesn't go
question.
to a spouse, with the exception of you can get a life estate in 1/3 of it. Which third? Hopefully the one with the bathroom.
Okay, so I have a question. Okay, so you
Yeah.
said, okay, so in this scenario, the house does, okay, let's just go to the original scenario where there's no other exes or kids.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so if the house doesn't automatically go to Sarah, but if she's on the mortgage, does the bank expect her to pay? Or can you just default on the mortgage and say, well, I don't own the house?
I don't know, Nanelle, would the bank expect her to pay? Oh, yeah.
He's on the deed.
All right, so this doesn't always come up. Let me explain something that, just so you know, those 12 people, most that work for me are in their mid-20s, except two of them are in their early 30s. So I'm having to explain this a lot to them. A deed, which is title, owner, and a mortgage are two completely separate things. Okay? A mortgage is a loan. All it is a loan with a bank. It just so happens that if you don't pay that loan, you've created a security of the home that they can have it if you don't pay it. So you can have different people on a title versus a mortgage. I'm only bringing that up because I'm talking about ownership. I'm not talking about debts or liability, but yes, I can't remember now who Meredith brought that up. So yes, being on the mortgage, you would still be responsible for that mortgage, even in this crazy title situation of who would own the home. Now, let me throw another thing out. I'm only giving you these scenarios because these are the things that happen all the time. What if Joe's two kids were under 18 years old? Any guesses as to what would happen then? Because we already established that Texas would say that half of the home goes, Joe's half goes to the kids, belongs to them.
Would it be split by the wives? Whether it be X or first?
Would it go in a trust?
It'd be the youngest first wife. No. So when you can't inherit anything, money or assets, when you're under 18. So what happens now, keep in mind, like some people are getting really freaked out when I start bringing this up. They're like, but what do we do, Lorie? What do we do? And I'm like, I really thought the answer to what you do preceded me coming here, and that is you get a
Get
will
a
or a
will.
estate plan in place. Like, this is all avoidable. So nobody freak out unless you're just going to decide, well, that's great, I don't care. No, these are all solvable problems. But when you're under 18, can't inherit anything. So what happens is the court is going to determine who will oversee it for the minor children. So as you all alluded to, who do you think the judge would pick?
The ex,
Did we just lose our connection to them?
we
We
did.
lost, yeah, we lost Kella's connection.
Lori's probably over there answering and none of us can hear her.
We lost y'all. I guess we really lost them.
I bet you the computer rebooted.
Yeah.
Well, at
It's
least
never
we
any
see
fun.
Anthony and
They're
Rebecca's
looking at
hand
us, but-
moving, so.
I wonder if we put it in chat, if they can see the chat.
I think Meredith is texting him.
Yeah, I just texted Kayla.
Technology is fabulous.
It's fun. They're back. The state of Texas got ticked off.
Yeah.
That's
I
good,
always
Laura.
say when this happens, like you're sharing an important message and Satan comes in and he's like trying to not let people hear.
Exactly.
All again.
Did Laura take over my presentation for me?
She did.
Yeah.
Is that what I mean? All right, that's okay. So, hopefully that led to a lot of dramatic effect. And the other thing that I would impress upon you is that anything can happen at any time. So you should be prepared because you think it can happen, but you can't always plan for these things. So better to have a plan in place. So did you get that in this scenario that, okay, so the judge would appoint, hi Cole, the judge would appoint the minor's children's mom, other parent to oversee that for
Ex-wife.
them, meaning that Sarah is now co-owning a home and everything with her dead husband's ex-wife. Do you know how much that plays out constantly every day? I mean, I actually had a friend who was texting me about a very similar scenario with her mom and her stepdad. And her response to me was, well, that's not fair. That can't be right. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. These are all avoidable problems. So you can see in 18 years, I've become a little jaded. These are all things that you can avoid. Just gonna put that out there. It's up to you whether you
I
take
have
it.
a quick question.
Yeah,
So
Janice.
you're referring to everyone being married, but what if they're just living together for like 18, 20 years?
Yeah.
And he passes and it was a joint purchase. Same situation, or is it worse?
Do they tell people that they're married? Do they refer to
Yes.
each other as married?
Yes. No, they
do
don't
have-
refer to as married. They just refer to them as their other half or something of that nature.
Okay. Do they have the intent to be married at all? Like if they talked about
I'm making it up, so I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
this couple.
So Texas has common law marriage. And
Right.
the 3 requirements is living together. Now, just so you know, it's not for a period of time. I was going to make a lesbian joke, but I'm not going to. It's not for any period of time. It can be just overnight. You have to hold yourself out as being married. That can be, talking to Jake at State Farm saying that, my wife and I are looking for a policy. And you have to have the intent of being married. So it depends if you can prove some sort of common law marriage, but just to keep it real clean and neat, if you are not married and it's clear that you're not married, then the issue is that it's going to go to the laws of Texas if you're a single person who gets your stuff. It doesn't matter if you co-own it with somebody. So if you've got kids, if you've got parents, because that's how airship, and that's HEIR, by the way. I love the clients that will say, I need airship, AIRSHIP, which, by the way, I am trying to get employees of Burch Law to chip in on a private jet, and I want to call it Burch Law Airways, but spell it HEIR. But so if anybody wants to contribute to that, just for the joke, we're going to buy a plane.
Is Pegasus going to be on the airplane?
Naturally, Janice, how could I avoid that? How could I avoid that? Let's go through a couple other things. So for those of you who have young children, and I know who you are, if you pass and there is no plan in place, the children become in wards of the state in child protective services, and they will be in foster care until a judge decides who the judge thinks should take care of them. And the judge is limited to a list of who the judge may pick. So if this is your best friend or a sister, but you have multiple sisters, and your spouse has multiple sisters, or your parents are alive or grandparents are alive, all of them are in the mix. So even if everybody, agrees, so-and-so always said that I would take care of the kids and all the family gets together, that's going to take thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to make happen. And it'll probably take months of kids sitting in a foster home to do that. We've actually had instances where there are kids that have to, the day that their parents died, spend the night in an office floor of CPS. So when we talk here in a moment about costs, because I know that is what a lot of people tell themselves, and I mean it that way. A lot of people tell themselves that they don't want to do it. Let me ask you this. If you have children, and whether they're grown or not, think back to when they were little, and I just played out that scenario for you, what is it worth to you for your kids not to spend the night on the floor of a CPS representative the day you die? Well, I mean, I could just get a form online, right? It's not that big of a deal. Let me ask you about online stuff. How do you know it works? That's always my biggest question. Because they're like, well, it's better than nothing. I'm like, only if nothing happens. How do you know it works? What if it doesn't? When do you find that out? When it's too late. When it's too late. So I'm going to take a minute to talk about that stuff, but I still want to talk about some of these things. So the last thing that I want to talk about that seems to be somewhat of a misperception is going back. Anthony already knows that the word automatic triggers me. So there's like a few words that make my soul die professionally each time people say them. Automatically is one of them. Do you want to know the other ones? Yeah. Form and boilerplate. Just I feel 5'9" when people say that to me. That's how cut down I am. Although I'm probably shrinking at this point. I might already be 5'9". Comes from carrying around a 40-pound child that is quite attached to me that I don't mind at all. Anyway, I digress. So the automatic thing. Well, some of you may remember the Terry Schiavo case in Florida. If not, Google it. Of course, it's Florida. That's where all the best stuff happens. But it is an example of how this was someone who was married. If anybody knows this story, do you know what happened to Terry? She had a stroke that put her in an incapacitated state on life support. Do you know how old she was?
Wasn't she like 30?
She was in her early 20s.
Yeah, early. Oh, I thought early 30s. Wow.
Early 20s. So guess how sympathetic I get when people are like, oh, I'm young, I'll get around to that. I'll do it when I'm old. Yeah. So the reason why she became a national news story is she was married. Her husband was trying to make decisions, but her parents disagreed with his decisions. I think they probably all very genuinely were trying to make the right decisions by Terry. But the fact of the matter, because she didn't have a living will or directive to physicians or a medical power of attorney or any of these things, became a huge news story. And certainly probably was not the legacy that Terry would want to leave for her family and for her loved ones. speaking of this time of year, when you turn 18, nobody has automatic rights to make medical decisions, have access to medical information. So I've got a lot of parents who have kids heading off to college and they don't want to be locked out if there's an emergency at school of making decisions or finding out what's going on. So just whereas even if you're married, you should have all the things to make sure that you can make decisions for each other. If you're 18 or older, your parents, should be dragging them in. Now you have to consent to signing these documents. I'll just warn you. I mean, our 18-year-old didn't. I just made her sign it. But it's important to know. So things don't happen automatically. There's a lot of default things that happen in Texas, particularly for married couples. I can tell you the biggest place where we see that whole property thing happen is usually much older couples where one dies, and because the survivor is on beneficiaries of life insurance retirement, because they go to the bank and the bankers have set the accounts up to be with joint tenancy. What you don't realize, if it's a Texas bank, or even if it's not a Texas bank, that all that paperwork you're signing creates the right of survivorship thing. So that's why bank accounts will work that way. So, let's say it's dad who died. Mom is like, well, I got all the bank's accounts in my name. I got the life insurance and retirement. I don't have to do anything. Well, let me tell you something. Nanelle, am I right? If a mortgage keeps getting paid, is anybody going to tell you that your house isn't yours? If you keep paying the taxes, nobody's going to tell you. What happens is if you try to sell it or you try to refinance it, you're going to find out then. But when do you think they normally find out? When mom passes away. And the kids are in my office saying, yes, mom passed, we need to probate her will. And then we look and say, your dad's name is still on the title of this home. Oh yeah, they were told they didn't need to do anything. Guess what? Yes, we do. And even if there is a will, and I think Debbie may have alluded to this question a little bit, you have 4 years to probate a will in Texas. And people ask me from the date of signing it. I'm like, no, from the date of dying. I don't know why that's so funny to me. Like, I mean, it might be good for business. Like 4 years after your will, you've got to redo your will, or else it's not valid. But no, it's 4 years from the date of passing that you would need to probate that will. So untangling a lot of issues. So there's just a overview of the things that happen when you don't have, and I do want to say plan, because there are a lot of things I'm going to take a few minutes on here in a moment to talk about some other things, especially trends in Texas. And Amy just, is she still there? She is. Spoiler alert, California is one of the worst states for probate process, but Texas is really trying to compete with you. So we're catching up on how terrible that process is. So let's talk about the dangers of not doing it correctly. I can tell you, I've met with a lot of people, and I have yet to meet anybody who's super proud of themselves. They did something on the internet. I don't have anybody who's like, yeah, I've got this legal doom will. It's golden. I know it is, Lorie. Although, spoiler alert, I am going to launch a new program where we put your DIY wills to the test, where I actually am going to review these plans for free and tell you if I see anything wrong with it. Hey, there's a few occasionally, but let me tell you a couple top things that we see that are issues with this. And by the way, a lot of this, unfortunately, or not really unfortunately for me, but unfortunately for consumers, a lot of half-rate law firms do almost as bad of stuff as this. But one of the biggest problems with the online internet do-it-yourself will kit kind of stuff is they aren't signed properly. I know it shouldn't be a science. I don't know why it is, frankly. It's baffling to me. But at least 70% of the time, I'd say, not even signed correctly. There is no close in probate and estate planning. There is no, okay, it wasn't signed properly, but can we at least show it to the judge to show intent? No. Either it's signed properly or it doesn't exist and you're back at square one. One of the most actual case that we had early on in my practice is a guy passed away. He had 2 adult children. He had a will. I knew it was an online will because guess what? We can tell on page 1 whether it is or not. And I'd done it enough. It was still early in my practice, but I'd done it enough to just flip to the back to see how it was signed. And let me make sure I answer that question, Debbie. And so I flipped to the back and my heart sank and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So dad signed on one date Witness 1 signed on a different date and witness 2 signed on a third date. Now, it doesn't have to be dated, but it was. So I knew, which means a court's going to know. So I just take a deep breath and I said, they're all signed on different dates. And so, Amy, we're going to talk about that. And I said, they all signed on different dates. She said, yeah, he got this diagnosis. So he went online, got it, signed it. Then a friend was visiting another day. They signed it. And then he went over to a neighbor's house a few days later. And I said, this isn't valid. They all have to sign at the same time. And she's like, okay, well, can we show it to the court? No. She said, what do we have to do? And I said, well, we have to file what's called a determination of heirship. This is going to partly answer your question, Debbie. We have to file what's called a determination of heirship. We have to have the court appoint an attorney ad litem to research the heirs. And then we have to get your brother to agree to you serving as the executor. You all don't have to understand any of what I just said. I would imagine that you don't unless you've gone through it. But does it sound fast and cheap? Tis not. Tis not. So I know that the dad who had a home and a bank account was thinking, this is easy. I don't need to go to some attorney and do this. I'd be willing to bet if he knew what he was doing, he would have taken time to find an attorney to have done it correctly. So Debbie, just a real quick answer. If you missed the 4-year probate date, it's a slightly different answer now than it would have been about 3 to 5 years ago. There are some alternatives slipping in, but probate courts around Texas, they are putting up a lot of restrictions to make things difficult. So technically, it means there is no will. And you have to do the process that I just said. There are some exceptions. You have to prove to the court that you didn't know that you had to probate or you lost the will. And it used to be, you could just say something flippantly and the courts would be fine. No, they want hard evidence. Then the only other thing is there is this thing called a muniment of title that sometimes you can use the will for, but it's still going to be some hoops to jump through. So that's the answer to your question. A couple other examples of where I've seen DIY disasters is I did have someone who successfully did a living trust on the internet, even successfully got a deed signed and notarized and recorded in the county records. Impressive. I mean, it really is impressive considering what I see. However, there's going to be a but, right? 6 years of losing their homestead exemption, they decide that they should maybe talk to an attorney. And so I look at it and I'm like, yes, the language that needs to be in there is not in there to preserve your homestead exemption. Your homestead exemption, my fellow Texans and Amy, just so you know, Amy, property taxes are insane here because we live so free and unregulated. They're insane. And so it was a quick fix for us. But I am certain that the amount that they paid extra in 6 years of losing their homestead exemption would have more than have paid for a comprehensive plan if they had done it that way. I've got other issues, and this is actually with law firms that I think they were just trying to find the cheapest ones in town, where they didn't really spell out whether co-executors could act together or independently. We are working on hearing number 4 over the same issue because the judge keeps changing her mind in Dallas County on whether one of them can serve independently or not, which just, to toot my own horn, when you go to really good law firms, or in our case, great law firms, we ask about those things. Like, okay, you want to have 2 people together, which is a terrible idea, but if you can't talk people out of it, then do you want them to serve together alone? What if someone predeceases? What if they decline? And we spelled that all out, but it wasn't. Another example of something that we had was where it was 5 adult children. Mom had son as the executor. She just wanted him to be able to deal with everything, sell the home, pay off expenses, get into the accounts, and then once he was done, divide it up 6 ways. Well, because there wasn't a clause that allowed him to sell the house on his own as executor, the court insisted that all the siblings that did not get along, that were all over the country, agree to the whole home selling process. Which it's hard enough to agree with yourself when you're buying or selling a house. So just, I could go on and on and on, and a lot of times I do, but I won't tonight, on all the dangers of the online stuff. So we now established there's a lot of risks to doing nothing. Hopefully we've established there's a lot of risks to trying to do it inexpensively, which it never is. Why do people try to do the online stuff? Because they think it's quick and cheap. Maybe it's convenient and efficient. It's none of those things. And if you find a good law firm, they're going to be able to walk you through those things. So, oh, one last thing though, no, that this is really critical. Beneficiary designations on life insurance, retirement, investment accounts, those all operate independently of what your will or trust says. So if you're doing this stuff online or through a will kit or through a law firm that's just churning and burning cookie cutter stuff, and then you go over for your life insurance or retirement and you put your minor child listed there, a 6-year-old, or maybe it's your sister that'll take care of her, huge mistake. And there's no way to connect those things. What you need to make sure of is that those beneficiaries are coordinated properly to whatever your plan is. So if it's a will, then, and there's a trust for kids, then you got to make sure that that language is in there. If it is a living trust, which I'm about to segue in and then see what other questions that I have, then it might need to have the trust as a beneficiary. Or maybe you owe your mom some money because she gave you seed money to buy your house. Maybe you need to make her a 20% beneficiary on your house. But none of these things you're going to know unless you're talking to someone who looks at the big picture to really guide you through those things. So those are a lot of the issues that we find with trying to do it online or trying to go, you know, this half rate way. So the last couple things that I want to make sure we talk about, pending other questions, and I'm going to put some things in the chat as resources for you. Actually, I'm going to put this in the chat right now. It's a chart. I'm very proud of this chart. But I also want to make sure that we talk about urgency, like why waiting to do this. So that'll be the very last thing. So let me know if that URL, handouts for you all, pulls this up. You know, let me know. Yeah, looking at that. If it worked for one of you, it should work for all of you. So I have a yes that this worked. Okay, so this kind of brings it all together. Let me explain a living trust real quickly because Amy brought it up. So if you didn't catch on, let me impress upon this because this is huge. A will has to go through probate court. Okay, it still has to go through a court that approves it. As I'm about to demonstrate, it's faster and cheaper. And the best part is the state of Texas not making your decisions for you, but it still does. We get calls all day long, you know, so-and-so passed away. I have a will and I'm the executor. It's like, you don't have a will until a judge says it is, and you're not the executor until a judge says you can. All right. There are a number of different alternatives, but kind of the biggest one and most popular one is something called a revocable living trust. And let me tell you, you do not have to have a top hat and monocle to need this. It has nothing to do, zero to do with having a bunch of assets or wealth or anything. There's plenty of these other types of trusts that we have to do to kind of offset estate tax and everything. But does anybody know what the federal estate tax exemption is this year? It's about $12 million. So if your estate is below $12 million, there's not going to be any taxes. You don't have anything that you need to. If the estate is above $12 million, please call me today. But then there will be taxes due. We have to do some special stuff. But this revocable living trust, it says all the same stuff a will does. Revocable means you can control it, change it, amend it the same way you can a will as life changes. Living means it exists right now. And you make yourself the trustee of it. So let's say I have the Lorie Burch Trust. I put my home into it, bank accounts, everything into it. I can change it, amend it, buy a new house, close an account, open an account, do whatever I want with it. No separate tax ID, tax return or anything. But when I pass away, unlike a will that has to go through probate, the person who's designated to oversee things, in this case, a trustee, not executor, can immediately step in. So it essentially speeds things up and it can reduce, if not completely eliminate, any costs. Before I walk you really through this chart very quickly, I want to impress upon you, there is no downside to a living trust. They haven't been as popular in Texas versus a state like California, because until a few years ago, probate in Texas was fairly simple by comparison. That is changing. I've shared a couple of stories with you. We never know where judges are going to pull things from. It's puzzling to us, but it's taking a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of other little tricks we can do as alternatives to court processes. Title companies, banks, they're not accepting all of this anymore. It's a different world. So if you ever talk to me 3 or 5 years ago, I might have even talked about this. but I'm talking about it now because it's a disaster. It is so bad. Let me tell you, as a business person, we have contemplated not doing probate anymore unless it was a will done by Burch law. That's how bad probate is. We are willing to give up that business because it's a nightmare. And for these people that didn't do anything or did wills that don't work, you're not here to be pissed at. So who do you think they're mad at? We're tired of it. We are tired of taking your family's, you know what? Seriously, it is very disheartening and sad. And people are mad and livid. I had one lady, and this was with a will, and you know, straightforward process. But think about the emotional you know, cloud that is hanging over people when they're going through this. This isn't, you know, just buying a car or something. This is somebody that you love has passed. And it's not when people are best. And we have one lady who is so upset with us because she just wants to sell her husband's car because it's so hard for her to look at. And we keep getting delay after delay after delay on something with the court. And she's mad, but really is just the way she is living out how hurt and how grief stricken she is. Really don't like doing that to people. So quick and dirty rundown of this. So the first line shows you the cost of the plan. Well, the best part of not doing anything, it doesn't cost anything. Then it kind of goes downhill. Because it's going to take about $7,000 on average. There's always exceptions, but typically that determination of heirship process is about $7,000. And if you're really good at math, you can catch on to, you know, 14,000 plus for couples. Because, you know, if you're married, there's two of you. That'll only continue to go up. It can take 9 months. Let me explain what that means. That means to start. That means to get a probate hearing. That doesn't mean to wrap everything up. That means before you get the paperwork that you take to Nanelle to get access to the bank account. That's before you can transfer or sell your husband's car. That's before you can do anything. And then it's really terrible because it's the tagline, right? Who gets the home? Who gets money and asset? We've already established this. State of Texas, state of Texas. One thing I haven't talked about yet is privacy. There will be a public record of all your assets, your family marital history. Some of you don't know that, you know, we're on spouse number 5. Well, that's all going to be there. And you're going to have 2 people who knew you willing to testify. I'm not kidding. I can't make this up. Who will have to testify that they knew you, knew your marital history, knew your assets, knew all your kids in order to get that approved by the court. Okay. So the next step is having a will. Now, let me talk about the approximate costs. First and foremost, those are on, so those are like Burch law ranges. They're on somewhat of the higher end of us, but I always like people to see kind of the worst of it. That is pretty standard as far as fee ranges if you're going to a qualified law firm, okay? It also, just so you know, because it's not on this chart, is including medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney. It's including disposition of remains. It's including declaration of guardian for yourself. It's including a living will. Like, it's including a whole plan. It's not just the singular document, which I think is probably worth it, but that's what you can expect. So getting a will, great. You are going to reduce the cost of probate, but probate with the will, uncontested, no issue, still going to be about $3,000 right now. Court fees, attorney's fees, all that. It's still going to take possibly about 3 months before you can get a hearing to get started. This is where the will pays off. All these decisions you get to make. Now, some people don't like this. It's still going to be a public record. Your will and some of your assets are going to be a public record. So slide on over. This is what I talked about with the living trust. Yes, a living trust is going to cost more money up front. People come in and they'll say, I want to have a plan, but I want to save as much money as possible. I want as cheap as possible. I'm like, now or later, that's your choice. Like, seriously, because if you like ROI and investments, then taking the time and money now is going to have this huge payoff in the end, because then you see 0 cost to probate, no time. You still get to make all the decisions. And for those of you, I mean, I don't know anybody hates privacy, but there's some people who don't care about this aspect of it. And some people do it just for this, but it's not a public record. So particularly if you have a contentious family situation, a living trust might be good because it's a heck of a lot harder to challenge something that you never see, that there's no court hearing. But one of the things is it's going to be more work. So I think the cost of it, but there's also work you need to do. That is, you got to connect homes and bank accounts. that's where your money pays off when you're going to a qualified law firm versus people who lose their homestead exemption, or go to a law firm that doesn't give you any guidance on now, how should my accounts be? Now, how should I set up my beneficiaries? So that's kind of an overview of looking there. The last thing I want to say, and then I'll take a couple questions until Kella pulls me off, is that the urgency. So I have a lot of people, I mean, I've yet to talk to anybody in all of these years. I color my hair, so you can't really see how old I am, but it's old. And in all of my years, I've never talked to anybody who didn't think this was important. Deal a lot with people who don't know the ramifications of doing nothing, talk to a lot of people who think maybe DIY is the way to go. But once talk to them and even telling them, you know, it's worth like this expense, but I'll get to it. Or, you know, I might have another kid, or, you know, I'm not really sure if I want things to, you know, my sister to control things, all of these delays. In the meantime, you never know what could happen. And so I will tell you, I'm looking at these numbers too. We deal with regular everyday people. This is not couch cushion money, but I see what it saves, not only in time, money, but also heartache. And when you look at things like, you can compare it for those of you who own homes to homeowners insurance. That's averages around $3,000 to $4,000 every single year. Every single year you are paying that. And unless you're really unlucky, you don't have a claim every year. And even with you, when you do, it's going to be thousands of dollars more. Do you ever regret having homeowners insurance? Do you ever think it's not worth it? So I don't know why people wouldn't take the same amount once, twice, maybe 3 times in their entire lifetime to make sure that that very asset doesn't go through a lengthy, expensive probate court process, or to make sure that they're kids. So again, the way I started is the way I would end, and that is the scenarios that can play out. What is it worth to you to avoid that? What is it worth to you to make sure your child is not a ward of the state? What is it worth to you to make sure you don't share your home with stepkids? What is it worth to you to make sure that you'd be able to make emergency medical decisions for your spouse or your adult child? And I'm in all those categories, and I know that I would spend 10 times that amount at least if it took that. So it's important to get this done, get it done right, and get it done now. And if you don't have will, State of Texas has one for you. So I appreciate your time. Do I have time to take some of these questions?
Yeah, Meredith has a question.
Yeah, I think I missed another. Was the question before? I know Amy asked about living trust, answered. Debbie asked about 4 years, answered. Were there other ones before Meredith that I missed? Okay, all right, I'll rely on Laura. She's used to assisting me on things. So if you do have a
Well,
will
you actually do have 2 more. So once you're done with Meredith, then I'll scroll back to you 2 more above that.
See, I told you, Laura's always got my back. So Meredith, that is a tricky question, but so technically they're not official guardians yet, but if there is a will that establishes guardians, the court and CPS will work with those people to make sure that they're secure with them. They're much more willing to do that if they don't have anything, because how do they know that, you know, your sister is a drug addict or something like that? But if you've got something that says that, they absolutely will work with the family. There's also something where there's like a temporary guardianship document that, because I've got a lot of folks that have out of the country permanent guardians, so we can also do a document where you have temporary guardians until people can get here. Great question. All right, Laura, hit me. What did I miss?
So Janice asked, how often would you recommend reviewing your will?
So I would take a look at it at least every 3 to 5 years. But I would also say, make sure that life events trigger you to review it. If there's been births, deaths, marriages, divorces, change in assets, retirement, any of those things are a good time to take a look at those things. A good, you know, if you had an attorney do it, it's good to keep in touch with them, because there are changes in the law, most significantly, you know, the estate tax, which has changed mostly for everybody's favor, but it can always go back down. But the other thing that we've seen is, again, I just cannot emphasize enough how much probate has really changed in the state of Texas. I do have one more URL for everybody, but I'll get there in a second. What else was there, Laura?
You might have answered this, but just to make sure it was answered, Debbie asked a follow-up question, and she goes, if you missed the 4-year probate date, then what do you do?
Oh, yeah. So that's what I was saying, is that you'd have to do like either that determination of heirship thing, or there was that muniment and title, which again, not a lot of people necessarily accept, but it's pretty much game over. There are some very limited exceptions to that, unless you're in Collin County. I mean, Collin County, well, he's retiring, so never mind. It's terrible there too. Let me put one more thing in the chat here. This is so for you all, it's going to be a link, but for everybody around here, it's a QR code. And what it is, it's a way to get a downloadable guide to some of this information. It's also, if anybody wants to reach out to me or talk to us, there's a couple of different options there for you. Really would strongly recommend. So I'm going to count on you all to tell me if that link works. Oh, Anthony, it worked for so long. Tell me if that link works. But of course, this is, for Texans, Amy, sorry. But if you know anybody that you really want to share some information with that are in Texas, again, I am in Dallas, but we can obviously do this virtually. If they want more information, they can follow up. But there is a downloadable guide that I think is real helpful. So feel free to forward that to anybody. All right. Any other questions? No.
Lorie,
No?
two quick questions. I got my hand up, so I wasn't sure if you can see it. LinkedIn offers us legal will services through a law firm, but it's all online. What are because now you've got me totally nervous to even using that service.
Yeah, don't do it. It's really cool that there's a lot of companies, and we have a lot of them around here because Dallas is such a headquarters for businesses that will offer this as part of their HR benefits. Particularly because a lot of I deal with LGBTQ clients, and you got to make sure you got that buttoned up with people who know what they're doing. But if you have young kids, you're not getting that beneficiary advice, if you've got multiple properties or businesses. But really, Amy, I mean, if you want me just to be straightforward with you, I wouldn't do it. A lot of the times they don't help people get things signed. They don't give you beneficiary guidance. I think there's other things, like they might have like a call-in number if you get a DUI or something like that. I think those can be helpful, or reviewing like a business contract, but I would not do estate planning because it is the one thing that if you do it wrong, when you find out it was done wrong, it's too late to fix.
Yeah. And then one other quick question. So I just bought a house, so back into home ownership again. And
I know,
so now
I updated your address in my
I need to start looking because I didn't have a will before because I didn't own anything. So when I start looking at putting all this together, do you look at everything as a whole? So everything inside the house would go to Zachary, my son, or in the will, or do I break out my jewelry? Do I break out certain aspects of it?
Yeah, so that's something to work with, the attorney on, or the law firm on, and what you want to do but most part, I imagine everything's going to Zach. So it's just kind of, wills and trusts are more encompassing, where they say everything goes here. And so that way you can buy a new house, you can get more jewelry, you can open a new bank account. But if you have something, okay, I want everything to flow here, but here's an exception. I want this ring to go here, or my life insurance beneficiary needs to be here, or I want this bank account to go there. Those are all things that you can sort of specify and preempt. Farah, I love your question. Because I'm not a natural salesperson, I don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to say something because it gets the law firm more money. I mean, more often than not, a living trust is going to be better to go. Although I've realized that we actually make a heck of a lot more money if you do nothing. So if I'm telling you to do a living trust, I am losing money for us, but I'm making things better for your family. But at the very least, if you won't do anything, or you're not going to do that, at least get a will and the powers of attorney in place.
Thank you, Lorie.
All right,
Thanks, Lorie.
very good. Thank you all. Good to see you all. Yes.
I want to thank Lorie for taking the time to be with us. We have a little gift for you. And as someone who has to sit on the desk opposite of somebody that hasn't done it correctly, or is arguing with me when I cannot